exposed the insidious cancer at the core of democracy that could take down Biden. If President Biden's Build Back Better plan crashes and burns, and there's a very real possibility it could. The good news, I suppose, is that yesterday, today everybody in Congress is like flying home or taking the day off or whatever they're doing. But and so Congress, reconvenes on Monday. But yesterday, they did not take a vote on the BIF plan, the infrastructure plan, because the progressives held the line and they said, no vote on BIF until we get a vote on BBB, Build Back Better. We want to vote on both. We'll vote on both, but don't just give us one of these things, and we will vote on it after the Senate has voted on both. So actually the House has voted, after we voted on both of them. So, good on them, right? Indivisible sent out an email saying the progressives have held the line. This is a great day in America. And I was impressed, actually, that most of the media did not run with the story, sabotage Biden. Instead, they pointed out that two senators, Manchin and Sinema, have sabotaged this entire thing. They've cut it in half. They've gutted a whole bunch of good stuff out of it. I'm not going to go through that list because it's just depressing. But there's a lot of good stuff left. But that might not even pass. And why might not that pass? Because Manchin and Sinema are taking money from the fossil fuel industry and from the big pharma, specifically with Sinema. That's, in fact, negotiating Medicare drug prices is out. They're not even going to consider that because Kirsten Sinema was like, hey, those people give me millions of dollars. Are you kidding? Or, whatever they give her. Are you kidding? We're not going to regulate drug prices. And of course, in the House, you've got, Josh Gottheimer and, all the so-called problem solvers caucus, saying essentially the same thing. So what's behind all this? Well, it's the Supreme Court. In their 2010 Citizens United decision, they basically said, money in politics, that's not corruption, that's not bribery, that's free speech. And corporations, they're persons. And they have the right to free speech guaranteed by the First Amendment that I guarantee you when the First Amendment was written, the framers of the Constitution who were writing it believed it applied to human beings. But here we are. And this is not only has the potential to destroy Biden's presidency, but it also is destroying the planet. Case in point, yesterday you had Congressman Khanna's subcommittee grilling 4 CEOs of big oil. This was the House Judiciary Committee's subcommittee on antitrust, commercial, and administrative law. And Ro Khanna was asking them, he came right out and asked them, will you stop running ads that lie about climate change? And they were like, screw you, Congressman. It was just breath. So why are they so unafraid of the power of Congress? Because they own Congress. They own the entire Republican Party. That was obvious when the Republicans had chances to ask questions. The questions were variations on, sir, may I fluff your pillow? Are you comfortable? Because they're wholly owned subsidiaries of big everything in America, the Republican Party. They've sold out completely. And you've got, a good-sized handful of Democrats in the House and obviously 2 of them in the Senate who have also sold out. And this would have been illegal before Citizens United. And frankly, it's disgusting right now. And when you look at what it has done, right, the majority of Americans don't want Medicare privatized. In fact, they want it expanded. Instead, we've got 40% of Medicare now privatized through Bush's Medicare Advantage scams. The majority of Americans don't want our post office gutted. Instead, back in 2006, when the post office announced that they were going to electrify the largest vehicle fleet in America, their cars, their delivery vehicles, Congress immediately got into the act and said, at the behest of the fossil fuel industry, we can't have that. You've got to set aside $5 billion a year into a trust fund for 70 years from now when your people who are not yet even born begin to retire. And Louis DeJoy is using that budget hole as an excuse to gut the post office. The majority of Americans would like debt-free college like every other country in the world, but the $1.5 trillion student loan industry just made a few phone calls, and that vanished from the Build Back Better program. The majority of American citizens would like a national health care system that actually works, but the health insurance company laid $1 million on Joe Lieberman, and he killed the public option, so we're left with $5,000 deductibles in Obamacare. The majority of Americans want something done about high drug prices, but Kurt Schrader, Scott Peters, Kathleen Rice, Kirsten Sinema, and a few others, wholly owned members of Congress, said no. The majority of Americans want their banks to stop hitting them with absurd fees for the smallest errors and would like some occasional customer service. Big banking pulls a few strings, and the senators are dancing like marionettes. The majority of Americans want something done about climate change before our planet becomes uninhabitable. Big coal and gas lit a fire under Joe Manchin, and hey, that's the end of that. The majority of Americans would like open and transparent elections and for their democracy to work like in other countries where the politicians can't be bribed. But sorry, neo-fascist right-wing billionaires have the final say on that, and it's not looking good. The majority of Americans would like net neutrality and for corporations to stop spying on them. Well, big tech just leans on a few members of Congress that they own, and that's the end of that. The majority of Americans would like well-funded public schools that teach things like civics and critical thinking skills. But the multi-billion-dollar charter school industry gets the last word. The majority of Americans would like to be free of gun violence in our homes and in our streets, while the gun industry gets the final say here. The majority of Americans would like good union jobs, but the nation's giant employers have paid off politicians to gut union protections. The majority of Americans would like a food supply free of toxic chemicals that harm children and cause cancer. But giant fast food and processed food companies just laugh at them, while their buddies in the chemical industry hold their beer. Hell, the President of the United States would like all these things, and a few more. But he's certainly not going to get them because the Supreme Court gave corporations and right-wing billionaires final say over every piece of legislation. We are ripped off left and right, from airplane tickets to cell phone service to cable TV and the internet. Citizens of Europe, South Korea, Japan, they pay on average half of what we do for phone service, cable, the cell phone service, cable TV, and the internet. Because they don't allow monopolies, they enforce competition. Here, every industry is dominated by 3 to 5 major corporations. The Supreme Court brought us this. And here's the irony. The only way we're going to get money out of politics is to elect politicians who are saying, I'm not going to take money. And there's some really good news in that regard. 10 years ago, or thereabouts, I did a fundraiser for the Progressive Caucus. At the time, Raul Grijalva was the head of it. There were maybe 5 or 6 politicians who showed up. I think the caucus probably had a dozen members at the time, and we had maybe 100 people show up. As I recall, this was down in New Mexico. And, it was a small event. Here we are a decade later. The Progressive Caucus, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, is apparently the most powerful caucus in Congress. They just, look at what they did with the Build Back Better bill. They're saying, no, it's going to work. It's going to be done right. And these are people, these almost 100 members of the House and a few in the Senate, who have come right out and said, we're not going to take corporate PAC money. So, this is the good news. We are seeing progressive candidates coming out and saying this. And even, Donald Trump got elected by saying, I used to own politicians. I'd give them money, and then when I needed them, I'd call them and they'd be there for me. And you remember the debate in 2015 where all the Republicans were on stage, and he says, I'm not owned by these people. He says, I'm not accepting any money from anybody. Nobody has control of me other than the people here. But these, and then he points to the other Republicans on the stage. He says, the donors, the special interests, the lobbyists, they have a very strong power over these people. Pointing at Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio. So, the good news of that is even Republicans are disgusted. They voted for Donald Trump because he said this stuff. That's how he won the Republican primary. Even Republican voters are disgusted by big money owning our politics. So what do? There's an election coming up in a year from next week. In the meantime, there's going to be a bunch of primaries. We need to get money out of politics, and the way to do that is to elect people who are funding their campaigns with small dollar donations rather than money from big corporations. To elect progressives, or if there's any Republican out there who's willing to say, I'm going to run for office without corporate money, elect them too. I don't know of any. Maybe you know of one. Adam Kinzinger, by the way, just said he's going to drop out of the race. He's not going to run for re-election. He's being beat up for being on the January 6th committee. But this election is coming up, and we have to do everything we can to identify, elect, and support politicians who openly and sincerely pledge never to sell their souls to big money. We can do that.